That's a decision by the conference. I'll allow the conference to make whatever decision. Whether I'm Speaker or not, I'm a member of this body. I know what history has had, and I can lead in any position it is.
Welcome back to America Decides. That was just one of several instances of California Republican Congressman Kevin McCarthy refusing to rule out the possibility of running again for his former job of House Speaker. Meanwhile, new CBS News polling reveals Americans want the next speaker to prioritize working across the aisle with Democrats. CBS News Executive Director of Elections and Surveys, Anthony Salvanto, joins us now. You have some numbers that jumped out at me. That was the first one. The polling shows that it's not just Republicans, but Republicans who are surveyed that like to see the speaker do both parties' business.
Yes. And now that doesn't mean people get what they want, right? But what you do want to see is, or look at, is these differences between the MAGA Republicans in the rank and file, people who identify with the movement, and people in the Republican Party who say that they are not part of MAGA. Because that, I think, is reflective of some of what you're seeing going on in the House, right? So you get a majority of Republicans saying, yeah, they would like to see the next speaker work across the aisle. But that number drops to less than half, to 43%. If you look at the MAGA Republicans, and then it goes back up again to over two-thirds, if you look at the Republicans who are not MAGA. Well, does that define then in the rank and file what we're seeing in the House and some of those splits in terms of what they want? Yes, in many ways it does, Scott.
But at the same time, they also do support some very Republican priorities, including impeachment.
Indeed. So you have a majority of Republicans saying they would like to see the next speaker try to impeach Joe Biden. That is very different from the rest of the non-Republicans in the country, the Democrats, the independents, who are way lower on that, 72 all the way down to 30% who say that. So that is a difference. Again, Republicans get to choose the speaker, and that's obviously a priority for them. But you do want to understand that difference and that disconnect, if you will.
It's a really interesting binary choice that's forming here. We have Jim Jordan, the ardent Trump loyalist who has Trump's endorsement, running from the House Judiciary Committee without leadership experience and without a fundraising base. You have Steve Scalise, the House Majority Leader, who does have leadership experience, does have a fundraising base, but doesn't have the Trump endorsement. How does that factor in based on what you saw?
I wanted to know what that Trump factor was for people. And so I asked, should the next speaker be loyal to Donald Trump? And you do see a majority of Republicans, in particular MAGA Republicans. But it goes from just over half among all, and then all the way up to over 8 in 10 among the MAGA Republicans. And that next speaker should be loyal, should show loyalty to Donald Trump. And I think you take a step back, that just reflects, again, the significance of him in the party. He's obviously the front runner for the nomination for the president, but that his impact on all of this cannot be understated.
Did you get a sense, or did you have the ability to measure how strong these viewpoints are, how devoted these Republicans who are surveyed are to the idea of bipartisanship? Is it a temporary dynamic or something they may want in the long term?
I think the difference is, what do you define as bipartisanship? And what we often see is bipartisanship means you get the other side to come to our side. And so sometimes there's that dynamic. And look, there is also a prevailing sentiment among people that the parties should at least try to work together, should at least try to see some common ground. And that is something that is a consistent finding across polling about Congress, across polling about everything. The polarized wings of the parties, not so much.
Can you extrapolate this a little bit, Anthony? Does any of this bleed over into 2024? Do you think that same dynamic is going to be there for the Republican primary voters when the presidential primaries begin?
Yes, because we've already seen in the primaries where the folks who identify as MAGA, not only are they more for the former president, but they look across the aisle, or the metaphorical aisle, and they see Democrats not just as the opposition, but as enemies, as threat to their way of life. And some Democrats see Republicans the same way. As long as you have that dynamic, and that's a prevailing dynamic in a primary, then that sets the expectation for a candidate who's going to treat the opposing party the same way. And that leads to more polarization, very frankly.
Those respondents should get comfortable chairs. It's going to be a while, potentially, until a new speaker is selected. The process does begin tonight into tomorrow. Anthony Salvanto, good work. Thanks.
Thanks, Scott.